All right, well, we're going to get started now. So thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Change Healthcare's Vision for Real-Time Settlement. We're excited to have you all here. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we'd like to go over. The first being that this webinar will be recorded, and after today's presentation, we'll be sure to send a follow-up email with that recording. The second is that we will have a question and answer session at the very end of the webinar where you will have a chance to ask questions as it pertains to the solutions we're discussing today. If we do not get to your question at the end, we will be sure to send a follow-up email and answer any questions offline. All right, and with that said, I'd like to introduce today's panelists. So we have Corey Todaro. He is our Senior Product Manager for Healthcare at Digital Asset. He will be discussing Daml and how Daml is helping shape some of the solutions that Change Healthcare is building. We have Shiv Gopalkrishnan. He is the General Manager for Network Solutions at Change Healthcare. And Shiv will be discussing what Change Healthcare has been building and innovating on. And then Emily Bailey is the Product Development Director at Change Healthcare. And Emily will be showcasing the instant claims settlement solution that Change Healthcare is building. And with that said, Emily, I will pass the mic over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be sharing our vision for real-time settlement at Change Healthcare. And just want to share that this is an early stage solution that we're putting together. And some of what we're talking about today is still subject to change. So just keep that in mind as we get through all of this. I'm really excited to have you guys here. So if you are not familiar with Change Healthcare, we are one of the largest independent technology companies in the healthcare industry. We connect over 1 million physicians to 2,400 insurance providers. We process $1.5 trillion in healthcare claims annually. And our network is comprised of about 15 billion healthcare transactions annually. And I share these metrics in order to communicate the breadth of our network. And Change Healthcare is largely thought of as a network infrastructure provider that has a robust software and analytics and services business that is powered by this network. So we see blockchain technology and DLT as primarily an infrastructure innovation in how networks are designed. And we believe that it will fundamentally transform how services and applications are built in the future. So it's exciting to be a part of this team and to be working on blockchain technology at Change Healthcare because we have the ability to create true market transformation with this innovation. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey now to introduce Digital Asset.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending today. Very excited to talk about the work that's been going on. We're going to be talking a lot about smart contracts today. That's the foundational layer that supports the work that's going on at Change Healthcare. And so I wanted to briefly introduce Digital Asset and Daml, but talk more abstractly about how smart contracts can improve business processes. Smart contract is a loaded term in the technology space associated with blockchain going back 5-6 years now. It's not very descriptive of what it can accomplish, though, and so wanted to take the time especially to discuss what we mean by smart contracts and what we mean by the nature of the application, the solution that's being developed. And so and it's most easy to discuss it, of course, in terms of the healthcare industry, which of course has complex workflows. And the complexity of those workflows belie the complexity of the industry itself, with lots of individual players, be they providers, individual physicians within those provider organizations, entities like Change Healthcare, who provide an essential role in the passage of the medical claim from provider onto insurance company or a variety of insurance companies. The insurance companies themselves have their own systems. All of these entities have their own data silos and their own data systems and their own way of doing specific things. Even though those business processes may be seeking to accomplish the same goal, they do it independently of each other. And so that creates a lot of complexity, what we call a lot of friction in that business process, which often has manual breaks, The fax machine is still at least part of the royal family of healthcare, even if electronic means of communication and payment are continually on the rise. It also requires a lot of reconciliation. So reconciling our version of what we see with other entities' versions of what they see, be that the provider, change, the clearinghouse, the insurance company itself, around the status of a claim, around the status of a treatment, the content of the treatment, the justification for the treatment, etc. And so all of this friction creates very complex and very expensive infrastructure to support those workflows. Smart contracts is a means of deploying distributed multilateral applications. And what do I mean by multilateral? We usually say something like multi-party, where we have these independent entities, these independent enterprises who are relying on a single piece of shared software to complete that complex workflow. But multilateral adds a nice layer in there, which I think is very important for today's conversation, in that Change Healthcare itself has a lot of different players or parties who are handing off a medical claim, who are performing specific functions on a medical claim as part of the overall service that Change provides to its clients. And so smart contracts can unite not only independent business processes or data silos within an enterprise, they allow that application to work across enterprise boundaries with other entities, with other separate enterprises as well. And that creates the opportunity for synchronization, for those parties to share a single source of truth, to avoid expensive reconciliation processes, in essence, to improve the business process to such a state that we can begin to innovate and offer fundamentally new services and value to clients and customers, which is, I think, and the topic for today is a great example of that, how it improves efficiency on the one hand, but on the other hand, it also enables the innovation to provide a new source of value for clients and customers and for the ecosystem itself. Next slide, Emily. So how are we doing this? How are we building, or how is Change building smart contracts to accomplish its goal today? And it's doing that with a technology called Daml. Digital Asset is the creator of Daml. Daml is an open source distributed application platform and language, which enables enterprises to very easily build these rather complex applications, which have to work across those enterprise boundaries, which have to synchronize the multiple parties, and do so at the scale and the security and regulatory compliance requirements that enterprise demands. So it's an enterprise first platform, and it enables entities like Change Healthcare to very simply write these applications. And we do that by focusing on the 20% of the application code, which is vital for the business process. In almost any application stack, about 80% of the code is very important, but it has very little to do with the specific business process you're trying to model. It has a lot to do with security, and has a lot to do with data persistence and data storage, networking, etc. Daml removes all that from the developer's concern and allows them to define the business process, specifically the rights and obligations of each of the parties who have a part in a complex multilateral business process. The rest of it, the 80%, is abstracted away from the developer and is handled by the Daml engine and what we call a Daml driver to remove that burden from application development. So it accelerates application development. It also makes it very readable and reasonable for a subject matter expert to reason about what the application is doing without having to be a developer yourself. And so we find that it really improves productivity in that subject matter experts and development teams can work very closely around the design of the business process that is going to be addressed in the solution itself. The other important thing it does is it provides a flexibility around how the network or how the multilateral network is configured. When we talk about blockchain or DLT, we often imagine a multi-party network of nodes. Not to get into network topology, but what Daml fundamentally offers, and I think uniquely in the market, is the availability of a lot of different persistence layers for the enterprise to choose, whether that's centralized databases, whether that's blockchains and DLTs, whether that's some of the new emerging interoperable network configurations. And it allows the enterprise to choose that stack, to configure that stack based upon the business needs of the solution, the functional requirements of the solution itself, rather than try to start from a a IT network perspective and then shoehorn the business process into that architecture. And so it gives a lot of flexibility for the enterprise to configure the stack in the way that best meets the business needs, that best meets the security requirements, and the scale and security features of their industry and of their business fundamentally. Daml is open source, so daml.com. You can download the software development kit and begin to explore the Daml ecosystem. It's much more than just a smart contracts language. There are API configurations, IAM configurations and tooling, everything that an enterprise would need to stand up a multilateral distributed application. Next slide. And finally, what about digital asset, the company itself? Not only our main product being Daml and its technology stack, that open source technology stack, but digital asset works very closely with enterprises who are launching into this space, this multilateral distributed application space, to enable those enterprises to capitalize on the benefits of the new technology very quickly. So we can offer that experience, that expertise, given that we created the technology itself to help generate the most value in the quickest amount of time. We could also bring partners to bear, and we're very eager to work with very closely with enterprises as they build out their applications. We've done extensive work in market infrastructure for capital markets, Hong Kong Exchange, Australian Securities Exchange. We're very, very happy today to discuss the innovation that Change Healthcare is accomplishing with this technology. And we're very excited to look forward into a broadening use of Daml in the healthcare industry, not only around financial infrastructure, but also in some of the clinical data infrastructures that underlie and ride alongside those financial transactions, as well as in the pharmaceutical space, which have a similar set, but very distinct problems around data silos, data standards, as well as reconciliation and essentially multi-party problems. So digital asset can be a partner for enterprises to help them accomplish their goals in short order with an innovative technology. Thank you.
Great, Corey. Thanks for the great setup here. Folks, it's probably not a big surprise to you when I say healthcare costs in the US are rising. They're already high to begin with. But let's unpack that for a second, right? And it's important to understand the workflow that's happening today in the market. Now, once a patient is seen by the provider, and you all have been there, there are several steps that happen between the payer and the provider before a claim gets fully adjudicated and reimbursed to the provider. Now, each of these steps that you see are taking place in siloed systems and ultimately result in an enormous amount of waste. Just to give you some numbers, the total administrative cost for payers and providers put together to manage these claims range roughly between 12 to 16% of revenue. And if you do the math, that's roughly $400 billion, right? In addition to that, the providers have to wait almost 40 days, sometimes even more, to get reimbursed for the service they've already delivered. So if you do the calculation on cost of working capital, that's about $100 billion there. Now, look, needless to say, this is a highly inefficient process and a poor experience for all parties involved, the providers, the payers, and most importantly, the patients, right? So especially the providers, right, as they continue to grapple with the long-term challenges that this whole pandemic has thrown at them and the disruption that's caused in the healthcare system, this is becoming a big sore pain point for them. Now, we are taking an integrated platform approach to solve this problem. If you go to the next page, our goal is to deliver a retail-like experience in healthcare financial transaction. Now, what does that really mean? It really means two things. One is we want to enable a real-time transactions, real-time claim transaction between provider, payers, and the patients. That's one part of it. And the other part of it is we want to do it at half the cost. In fact, these two things go hand in hand. We eliminate the waste, things go faster, costs go down. And this solution really leverages several of our products that we already have in the market that are payer or provider facing to deliver these outcomes for all parties involved. Now, let me give you a couple of key examples. Like for providers, what we're doing is we certify each claim through the solution by performing rigorous quality checks, and we're making real-time payments by pricing these claims very effectively. these payments can come either directly from the payer, if a payer is on our network, or through a financial entity in the middle to create the same experience for real-time payments. Now, on the payer side, we deliver clean claims that are ready for adjudication and supporting clinical data first time, every time. So look, you can see how this solution to operate at scale has to be a multi-party system, multiple providers working with multiple players. And blockchain is a very elegant solution for this particular problem, especially when there's a trust deficit between these parties. And you'll see later in the presentation how we're leveraging the digital asset smart contracts and the Ledger API to record some of these claim lifecycle events through this whole value stream. Now, we believe that this new approach will really help providers accelerate their transition to value-based care as well, while maintaining the support needed for their patients and caregivers, which is extremely important. Let's go to the next slide. Now, as a company, we're placing a very, very big bet on this. So not only do we have near-term execution plans, but we also have a long-term vision on how we're going to really evolve the solution over time. So currently, in our first horizon, we are focused on delivering capabilities around payment accuracy, risk management, and delivering real-time B2B payments, so between the provider and the payer transactions. As we move to Horizon 2, we're going to deliver more components around efficiency and analytics. What does that mean? It's simplifying claim generation process. It also is going to encompass the B2C, the patient component, their responsibility of the payments as part of this. And as we go to the nirvana state, if I say Horizon 3, which is our goal to create an autonomous, frictionless network, a multi-party settlement and payment solution which has potentials to get into tokenization and securitization of risk pools, et cetera. So look, folks, we are early in the build cycle right now with this product, but as we've talked to some of our customers, there's been just a tremendous amount of interest from providers and payers. So we see a huge potential for this solution as we evolve this in the market. Now, to go deeper into what we're building and how we're accomplishing that, I'd like to pass the ball to my colleague, Emily Bailey. Emily, over to you.
Hey, Emily, you are on mute right now, just as a heads up.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
So as you can see, we have a very big vision for how we see this network transformation taking place over time. So what we're going to talk about today is where we are in this process. So the user that we have in mind at this stage is the claims analyst. This is an individual like Andre here who is typically employed by the health system, by a provider system, or by a third-party service that handles claims and payments on behalf of the provider. So their responsibilities include submitting the claim for payment, following up with denied or pending claims, and managing the overall work list of claims that have been submitted and the responses that they are receiving on the individual claims. And their goals are to reduce the amount of time that these claims are sit in accounts receivable, and to increase the throughput of claims that can be processed, and to increase the accuracy around the payments that are received against those claims. So just to kind of break that down for the non-healthcare attendees we have, what this really equates to is going back to the time it takes for a typical claim to be processed, around 40 days. Any error or issue that arises against a claim can increase the amount of time it spends in accounts receivable. And if a payment is received on a claim that is inaccurate, if they're an over or underpayment, that can create additional work on the provider side that equates to loss of revenue. So in addition to their goals around streamlining the claims process, they also want to make sure that when a claim is submitted the first time that it's correct. So So their pain points really include this highly manual process of orchestrating claim responses across a fragmented, incompatible system of applications. I think one way to think of this is that the claim itself is not a data object. It's not a type of information set that is shared across each of these systems. It's really a process that isn't really represented as in a single source of truth or in a single format that all of the systems can interact with today. And this creates a great deal of latency that the analyst has to work with. So what we're sharing here is a mock-up of the user experience or user interface that we have envisioned for the real-time settlement engine. This view is a work list of the claims that have been submitted to the real-time settlement engine. It is measuring the claims that have been paid out in this work list and what the average payment equates to. It also captures the integrity check success and the percentage of claims that pass through and pass the integrity check. And so this is tied to the rework that would be included if a claim doesn't pass the integrity check, has errors. The claims that don't pass these checks are not paid, but the claims that pass their integrity check and eligibility and payment accuracy, we provide an instant settlement or a real-time settlement against the claim with some level of variance that is to be included in the true-up process on the back end. The next view here is a dashboard that displays some analytics for more of an administrative view, an overall view of the revenue that is being collected off of the claims in this work list. So this provides the analyst or potentially their manager a view of revenue over a 3 to 9 month projected time or over the year, and gives them an idea of what their collection rates are and what their liquidity is against the claims that are being processed. So if we take a look under the hood, we can see how this application could be powered by the real-time settlement engine. So this is a bit of a architecture diagram that attempts to sort of explain what's happening in the Daml layers of the application and what's happening in the application layer. So when a claim is submitted by a provider to the real-time settlement engine, it goes through a series of modules that provide a real-time settlement. So the first module is a claims integrity module, which includes a variety of revenue cycle management applications that check for the integrity and the structure of the claim to make sure that there are no errors that would cause it to be rejected by a payer. And once the claim passes the integrity check, it is recorded to the ledger or the Daml layer via the ledger API as a validated claim. And then from there, the payment accuracy model will price the claim and determine the patient responsibility. And this initiates the settlement module and transitions the validated claim to a priced claim. In the settlement module, a settlement amount is generated and an 835 response is also generated with a payment posted, which would transition the price claim to a settled claim on the ledger and initiate a true-up process. And the true-up process, the response from that would also be recorded on the ledger. So there are a couple things going on here aside from just the state changes that we're recording on the ledger. We also, in the application layer, this is a bit of a simplified view, but Change Healthcare has a large number of applications that we're integrating with Daml via the ledger API in order to process the claims integrity check and the payment accuracy component, including a payment accuracy model that we built for the solution. And so we want to make sure that those applications are integrated with Daml and are able to be orchestrated in a multi-party workflow orchestration. So for the user experience, this is a real-time response, but what's happening under the hood is a combination of state changes that are being recorded on the ledger and contract templates that are being created, or contracts that are being created from templates that are stored on the ledger. So just to summarize that, the way we're using Daml at this stage of the experiment is for claims lifecycle management. It's to capture the transition of the claim from one state to another. And we do have a subset of claim validation rules that are also written in Daml, which is a really interesting way to use Daml to create a shared state of the logic or the rules that a claim has to be checked against in order to be proven valid. And we also have a number of bots in the Ledger API that are orchestrating the applications from the healthcare environment, the healthcare industry environment, to the distributed ledger environment. So going back to Shiv's vision, how we see blockchain technology and DLT complementing this vision, at this stage in time, we're really focused on automating workflows using smart contracts and deploying the DLT environment in the cloud. And at the next horizon, we will be expanding our application of digital assets and integrating AI and ML to improve payment accuracy. And our third horizon explores tokenized settlement and asset-backed exchange. And this is sort of how we see the technology being incorporated into the vision over time. As you might have picked up from listening to us talk about this, a great deal of financial risk can be centralized by the solution if we don't explore a system that has this multilateral, multi-party, autonomous network. And we think that digital asset exchange is going to be a necessary component into allowing financial institutions and insurance providers to directly integrate with the system, and that in order to provide that type of streamlined experience, we need to standardize the claims process using smart contracts and integrated applications. And we need to perfect the payment accuracy model that we're using to price and settle claims. So I think that concludes where we are with the presentation and opens us up for some Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And thank you, Shiv. So we have a question as it relates to Daml. Corey, I'll let you go ahead and answer that. The question was, does Daml have any ontological representation of complex entities? Corey, would you like to tackle that one?
Sure. That's a big question, and I'm not really going to be able to get all to it. But for the benefit of everyone in the audience, Daml has a first order term in the language itself. And that term is party. Party means essentially what you think it means. Party is an actor who has choices available to them, and choices are also a first order citizen in Daml. When we build Daml smart contracts, we build a template of a business process in which parties have specific rights and obligations. Those rights and obligations are expressed in the availability of choices that they can exercise at a moment in time. And that moment in time can change. They might be able to exercise a choice once, something we call a consuming choice, or they may be able to do it repeatedly, something we call a non-consuming choice. That basic framework gives us the ability to model very complex relationships between entities. Now, parties could be a whole enterprise. There may be transaction in which Change Healthcare as an enterprise is a party to a smart contract or to a template within Daml. But there's no reason why it has to be so blunt. It could be specific departments, specific data sources within an enterprise, and those choices and the rights and obligations expressed can be very precise depending upon how you construct the template. So I understand that, of course, in healthcare we have very complex entities, and the relationships between those entities add an additional layer of complexity around who needs to do what at what moment in time. Daml gives you a very robust vocabulary for expressing that in what I'll call human readable form. where the parties are identifiable and understandable from the code. The choices are very clear and outlined what each party can or can't do at a given moment in time. And of course, the role of the ledger is to record each of those choice exercises immutably to the ledger, so that we all share a record of what we've done with each other. Now, importantly, for Daml and for enterprise adoption of smart contract technology, privacy is a large concern. On a lot of platforms, contracts are visible to everybody. And all choice exercises and all quote transactions on the ledger are visible to everyone on the network. And Daml has a number of ways that fundamentally address that privacy issue. First off, as a party in Daml, in a Daml-based solution, you only ever have visibility into those contracts that are yours, i.e. Business processes on which I am a party or a signatory to, or which I've been granted observer rights. That's another type of flavor of party that you can bring to the table. I'm able to see things. I'm able to see the entirety of the contract. I'm able to see all changes that ever happen to the contract. Maybe I'm only able ever to see if a specific choice gets exercised by a specific party in that workflow. You have a lot of fine-tuned privacy controls within Daml, such that the specific data and the specific business terms of a business relationship are not revealed illegitimately to other parties who are not a party to that business process. And so that helps enterprises meet their fundamental privacy and regulatory issues, especially in healthcare, where a medical claim is PHI. That information can only be shared with a very limited set of parties within an existing complex relationship. And Daml is an ideal tool to represent that. The second area where privacy comes up is in network topology, where this data is being stored. And again, Daml gives you a very wide array of choices to store that to meet regulatory and business requirements. But I understand that there's some more questions coming in that can get more into that later question there.
Great. And as a reminder, if we don't get to your question or you have additional follow-up questions, we'll be sure to reach out offline. So we had a few more come in. Shiv, I would love to hear your response on this one. So what kinds of technology and business process changes would a provider and insurer need to make in order to become part of this network?
Yeah, great question, right? So let me talk about the business process changes. Our goal, as you see, is to eliminate a lot of the steps that happen today in the workflow and be able to bring that into this engine that we're building. So it's really to reduce the footprint of business workflow. And it's also important for us, and we've heard this loud and clear from providers and payers, that they do not want to go to 5 different places to stitch together the complete story about where they are from their claims management, total AR standpoint. So it's extremely critical that we build integrations right back into the revenue cycle practice management solutions for these providers, which we're doing right from the get-go, because that would be the way they connect downstream to their GL into the reporting system. So in essence, what we're building here is somewhat transparent to the customers, to the end users. It really helps create this activation set of steps in the background, if you may. As far as technology is concerned, what we're trying to do is insert ourselves between the payers and the provider. So for a provider, the experience is they're sending us the 837s, the claims essentially, and then they get in real time or near real time 835s and payments coming back from us into their core practice management and revenue cycle system. So very little they'll obviously need to adopt our capability, but it sort of plugs in the background without necessarily having to do any kind of change management and workflow changes there. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Shiv. So Emily, now I have a question for you. Can you elaborate on tokenized settlements on the roadmap slide?
Sure. So, what I can share at this time is we think that a natural evolution of this solution will include a settlement that is an actual function of the network. Right now, the network is really just capturing state changes of the claims process and responses from the true-up process as Change Healthcare and the real-time settlement engine interact with payers. But as we add more capabilities to the real-time settlement engine and the underlying blockchain network, we think that being able to settle the claims on the network is a necessary function and something that's just a logical evolution of the solution. And we also think that having a feature like this will open us up to new risk models and new financial models that will enable us to have payers and financial institutions be direct participants of the network. So at this point in time, we aren't working with a tokenized settlement function, but it's certainly on the roadmap.
Great, thank you. Next one on here. So Shiv, are you building out contracts in the system? Meaning, are you building a contract management system to allow for processing?
Yeah, so what we're doing is two things. To be able to really price the claim accurately, we are leveraging a contract management solution that we already have at Change Healthcare, which is being used widely by a lot of payers and providers. So we have access to some of that. In addition to that, we're also building a model leveraging historical claims data sets to understand between payers and providers for specific, procedure codes, how do these claims typically get priced. Now, in addition to that, we are also injecting capabilities like understanding patient responsibility, where are they in their deductible cycle through accumulators, so we can really parse out of the allowable payment amount, what portion needs to go to the payer and what portion needs to go to the patient. So there's a lot of pieces underneath, moving parts underneath this whole engine, but it really stems from that. Now, as far as smart contracts are concerned, we are leveraging in digital assets capabilities to be able to build certain rules as smart contracts, because as you can all sort of appreciate, these are rules that payers take very seriously. They're proprietary in some cases. And we want to make sure that there's clear ownership and control over these rule sets. However, all providers need to be able to subscribe to those rules and be able to execute them on their contracts or on their claims rather, so they can get appropriate and high accuracy outcomes. So that's where smart contracts come in. And then, as I said, for contract management for the payer provider actual contract, we are leveraging the capabilities we already have.
Great, thank you, Shiv. We have another question as well. So early alerts for management of risk-based contracts. So are you going to be building a multi-party coordinated care management system? And how would we be building solutions for the patient care side? Or how would this plug into that?
That's a great question. I think that's another big problem that the healthcare system as a whole is facing. We are limiting our scope right now to the post-visit or right after the visit value stream, if you may, and solving that problem. But there are other parts of our company that are focused on the broader picture around how do we really create that experience for the patients as well. So the short answer is we're not doing that as part of the scope of this program.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question that we have is, can you speak to some of the downstream benefits of real-time settlement to parties on the ground, so healthcare providers and patients, and how has the day-to-day experience changed and or improved from this solution?
Yeah. So let me give you an analogy, right? You go out and buy a product or service in a retail setting. You purchase the service or the product, you receive the product and service, you pay for it. All parties are even. The vendors receive their payments in near real time, and the buyers receive their service. That's a completely different model than what's available in healthcare today, right? It's just so much cycle time between the service time and the payment time, which is really what we're going after. So the experience we would see here is that we're shooting for, and there's obviously going to be steps that we would have to take to get to that end state, is a patient goes into a clinic for care, as the encounter of that patient provider is completed and the notes are closed out, we immediately process in real time the clinical notes to be able to build a claim, check the integrity of the claim, price the claim, and understand what's going to be the patient's responsibility, what's the payer's responsibility, before the patient potentially even leaves the premises of the healthcare setting, and then be to pay those components back to the provider in as real time as possible. So it's gonna has the potential, let me put it that way, to kind of really transform and bring truly retail-like experience into healthcare.
Yeah, if I can just piggyback off of that, some of the things that I can imagine from having a more retail-like experience in healthcare as a consumer are the reduced experience for the patient where they receive a bill several months later for $4.25 because a reconciliation has taken place and now suddenly this is owed to the provider. We want to create a more of a streamlined experience for all of the counterparties involved with an episode of care that can close out the payment agreement and the claims process within a matter of days versus over a period of months. And we can also look at over and under payments that occur and reducing that over time. And maybe in a more macro sense, we think that by improving the liquidity for the service providers, for the doctors and the clinicians that are involved with providing care, if we can give them accurate payments at the point of care, potentially over time, we can reduce the cost of care by eliminating all of the complexity that contributes to the rising costs of care that we're experiencing today.
Great, thank you, Emily. Okay, we have another question as it relates to patient care. So several people want to confirm, can patients see the claims in one place, or will it just be the providers and payers with this first iteration?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's in the first iteration, it's going to be providers and payers. We do have a tremendous amount of focus as a company putting on consumerization of healthcare. And we have plans on how we could potentially integrate this into a patient's view of how they can see the journey of their claims as well. But initially, as part of our first MVP launch, it'll likely be focused on payers and providers.
Great, thank you, Shivan. To kind of piggyback off of that, we had a question come in about how the claim pricing works. So one of our attendees asked, it sounded like you were pricing it on behalf of the payer, but then actually submitting it to the payer for actual adjudication, then reconciling. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and really it's good because I think there are two models that we're going after. We're starting with a provider first and a multi-payer solution, which in that case we are really acting as a payer's agent, if you may. So we are creating a payment based on the contracts that we have access to, be able to then generate an 835, which is a remit, and a payment back to the provider, while the claim still goes through its normal processes with the payer and comes back as a final payment, which we essentially reconcile like you articulated in your question. Now, we also have conversations going on with payers who want to play in this directly, in which case we are going to directly plug into their adjudication systems and be able to generate real-time adjudication, in which case, all the stuff happens in real time without necessarily having to have a huge true-up step in the middle. So there are really two models to start off with. We'll go with model one, multi-payer, one provider, and with a true-up step. And model two eventually will be when payers are involved, it'll all happen real time.
Great.
If I could just add, this is Corey. This is one of the real benefits of DLT technology and Daml specifically. No matter which course is taken, model one or model two, or even the talk of securitization or tokenization, reconciliation, true up, multilateral clearing and settlement is really a challenge. But with Daml technology, it's really well, I wouldn't say it's easy necessarily, but it's within the core strengths of the technology itself to enable global composability If you look at step one in the claims integrity, what change has done is really created an entity, an asset, for lack of a better word, that is then globally composable in a wide variety of reconciliation and settlement systems, whether that's directly through Change Healthcare or whether that's in conjunction with the payer or other financial entities. All of that is feasible, and it can be done by global composability. I mean that the asset can be carried to those adjacent applications without the redesign of the core application, and without having to redesign the entire stack. And so you can add on additional pathways around that core asset that's created in that very first step that Change is working on right now to meet almost any eventuality or business opportunity.
Great, thank you, Corey. So we will end on this. We have one more question and then we will wrap up. We have quite a few more questions that we have. We will be sure to follow up with those participants on the webinar offline. A lot of them have to do with technical specs, so we'll be sure to follow up via email, and we'll be sure to reach out. You can also reach out to anyone on the digital asset or Change Healthcare side team too, and we'll be sure to follow up with you. The last question, though, I wanted to pose for Emily, and it relates to the security within distributed ledger technology and blockchain. Are we still nervous about how secure the ledger is? And as it relates to personal healthcare information and sharing of that data.
Yeah, so I think, Corey was touching on this a little bit earlier about the different ways that Daml can handle privacy. And that's one of the reasons that we chose Daml for this solution is the flexibility that we have and not just the network topology, but in how we structure contracts such that a party who is not permitted to view a contract cannot see the contract. The only parties that can see a contract are parties that have been designated by that contract. And so the data rights that are in place for processing these claims are inherited by the applications that are a part of the claims process that we've integrated with this. And so all that goes to say that within the contract template itself, we have a lot of control over who can see what. And then with the network, the distributed ledger that we integrate with the solution, we have a variety of ledgers to choose from. And I do think there are some security concerns that we need to consider as we scale, especially as we add payers and financial institutions as direct participants. So in the current stage, Change Healthcare is the administrator of this solution. We're managing the ledger, and we're working through the payment accuracy and smart contract development around how to process the claim. But once we start scaling the network, we need to explore ledger implementations that enable not just privacy within individual transactions across the ledger, but data rights management between the entities and the companies that are coming to the table to provide the ledger with security. So Daml has, or Digital Asset has, a variety of ledger integrations that they work with, which will allow us to kind of experiment with the right implementation as we scale over time. And we're excited to explore those, but this is something that we are aware of and think that is going to play a big role, especially in how we structure the business agreements of a multi-party system as this scales. But in general, we feel pretty confident in the innovations that have been made around a digital distributed ledger designs, and being able to architect a DLT that can support private transactions, that can support multiple parties that are administrators on the network that are able to keep their transaction sets private while still providing integrity across a multi-party workflow. So I guess to summarize there, to be continued as we look at different ledger implementations for this solution, and I'm certainly open to ideas and feedback from this audience on DLTs that have achieved levels of privacy that you're confident in as well.
If I could just add, I raised the issue of privacy earlier on in the presentation. Daml does enforce the data rights view, so that I can't access contracts that aren't mine. I can't have access to choices. I can't see what other people are doing. That's at the application level. The storage level is a separate question. And Daml will always enforce at the application level data rights that are appropriate for healthcare, such that I wouldn't be able to access anyone else's PHI. Non-BAAs wouldn't be able to gain access to that information either. At the data storage level, though, it really depends on which ledger you're integrating Daml in with. A centralized database like a SQL works within the parameters of a lot of current stacks within healthcare, and that's an option with Daml. You can go fully centralized. I'm a trusted party. I'm a BAA to these entities. I can hold that information on behalf of those other entities under the current regulation. Now, multi-node networks where multiple parties are hosting nodes has always presented a problem for healthcare. Because people who are not party to the application can't even store the information. Whether there have been a lot of work on encryption schemes, but again, that lessens the value of the smart contract, because it essentially makes the smart contract dumber if it can't actually work with the data that's being represented. Now, one unique opportunity that Daml does present, and this is just what digital asset has available, separate from the direction that changes we're looking at, and network autonomy is down the road yet, so those conversations are still ongoing. But I do want to mention Canton. Canton is an interoperability protocol that Digital Asset has developed. And what it enables is Daml smart contracts to work with a unique storage system in which contracts are only ever stored on the nodes of those participants who are a party to the contract. And so only parties who are party to the contract will ever have that data stored on their node. If you're not a party to the contract, you see no network traffic. Your node receives no information. It stores no information either. And that is what I call the gold standard of privacy for DLT and healthcare. And I just want to point out, if you go to canton.io, you can see there's a video, and there's also a downloadable code demo, which exemplifies this in a healthcare context, in which we can not only preserve privacy by only storing the contract data on specific nodes of a contract, of a network, well, we can also prune the ledger to satisfy advanced privacy requirements like GDPR, where you can actually forget contracts in the past and remove them from nodes if that workflow is so authorized.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. Canton is something that we are pretty excited about on my team at Change Healthcare. It is a bit of a future state for where we are in our current solution. But those types of solutions are what we consider to be the right path for healthcare, understanding that there are significant regulations in place that we need to be compliant with, but there's also business interests that need to be protected when it comes to data privacy that we're interested in protecting as well.
And I was asked to repeat that. That's Canton, CANTON.io.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We had a couple additional questions that we'll be sure to answer offline. Please feel free to reach out again to the digital asset team and or the Change Healthcare team, and we'll be sure to answer those questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure to have you all here, and we will send a recording of the webinar as well as a follow-up email to the group. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.